Today we're bringing a little bit of the west coast of Africa to your plate with my Suya-Dusted Filet with red rice risotto. The filet is one of the queens, or should you say kings, of steaks. It's really tender, it's super flavorful, and we're gonna infuse even more flavor with a traditional West African and Nigerian spice called suya. It's chock full of flavor with bouillon, traditionally peanuts, but we're using cashews today, a little bit of paprika, salt, pepper, and seasonings, and we're gonna gently dust that on top and finish the fillets with the suya dust. With the side for that, because you know every steak needs a good side, we're gonna make some red rice risotto. The red rice is indigenous from Africa with roots steeply rooted in jollof rice from Africa and also red rice based out of the southeast of the United States. But I love my risotto, so we're gonna do a spectacular mashup by combining those flavorful profiles from the red rice with that creamy savoriness you'll find in your risotto. It's gonna be a hit. All right, so for our next recipe, the Suya-Dusted Filet Mignon with red rice risotto, this recipe just really screams Africa, West Africa, Nigeria, the ingredients, the flavor profile, and it's super delicious. But as with anything, it always starts out with super quality ingredients, and we're starting out with none other than one of my favorite cuts, the Omaha Steak Butcher's Cut Filet Mignon, 6 ounces, double trimmed. Amazing. All right, so what we want to do first, as always, is have our steak or whatever cut of meat come up to room temperature. Then you want to pat the steak dry. Water and moisture is the enemy of the pan, and to ensure that nice, hard, crusty sear, we want to always pat dry on all sides. That's going to allow the seasoning to adhere to the steak and also get that nice, crusty exterior as well when we put it in the pan. Okay, easy enough. Pat dry on all sides. And then from there, we want to do a really aggressive seasoning of salt and pepper because as with all seasonings, it always starts out with salt and pepper as a nice base. It's going to give you a nice crust and also really give you good flavor. And remember to always season a little bit more than you think you should because you want to have that seasoning really get down to the center of the steak. And it's gonna be really flavorful. All right, feel free to use any of Omaha Steaks' signature seasonings, but salt and pepper, you can never go wrong. All right, so top, bottom, left, right, all sides of the steak gets adequate love from the seasoning. Now, it's important when you're seasoning your steak, you want to always have a coarse kosher salt or a coarse ground salt. That way you have a visual cue of how much salt you're putting onto the steak so you know that it's seasoned appropriately. So you want to really use your eyes with this and just season appropriately all over. And it's really great using that kosher salt because as opposed to an iodized salt, a lot of times the iodized salt just dissolves into the meat and the iodized salt is also treated. So the kosher salt, it comes from the sea, it's naturally occurring, it's better flavorful, it also gives that nice crust on the outside, so kosher salt always. All right, so you notice right now I've got the top and bottom, but we have those delicious thick sides on the filet as well, so you want to make sure to get those too. All right. These are the steps that are going to ensure flavor and the nice crusty exterior on our fillets to give you that contrast and texture and flavor where you have that amazing coast-to-coast pink doneness on the inside of the filet and that nice hard char that is super indicative of a quality steak. And with these steps right here, you can make a quality steakhouse caliber steak every single time. All right, so we have our steak sufficiently seasoned, top, bottom, left, right, with kosher salt and black pepper. I'm gonna slide that to the side for a second. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't say my favorite part, or one of my favorite parts of this dish, is the suya dust that goes on the top of the steak. Now, the suya dust, it hails originally from Nigeria, and you can find it really in West Africa, any type of street vendor. You have skewered chicken, you have skewered steak, seafood, shrimp, any type of protein or vegetable, the suya dust or suya marinade or seasoning goes perfect with it. It is the perfect combination of umami, nutty, spicy, salty, savory, delicious. And you want to always have that yum factor. So the suya dust I'm about to make has all of those ingredients and more. So first things first, we have our food processor here. And to this, I want to add my roasted cashews. Now, I have to say, traditional suya has peanuts, but today we're going to go ahead and improvise and use cashews as well. But if you want that super authentic suya, make sure to use dry roasted peanuts, but the cashews are going to have you in the ballpark of that same flavor profile. All right, so I add my cashews to the food processor. That's gonna give it that nice savoriness, that nice kind of creamy note from the cashews, and a nice nuttiness that is indicative of a great suya. To that, I wanna start adding our flavoring and aromatics. So I wanna add a little bit of ground ginger. I wanna add garlic powder, onion powder. I want to add a little bit of bouillon. The chicken bouillon really gives it the nice umami bomb, that flavor in your face, that nice salty note, and just really gives it a nice savoriness that you want to find in your suya seasoning. So to that, I add the bouillon, a little bit of smoked paprika, and cayenne pepper, because you know I'm all about that heat. And just a little bit of cayenne in there goes a long way for that subtle heat on the back end to where it's a really nice, balanced, delicious, and super flavorful suya seasoning. All right. And a little bit of black pepper as well. So we have all of our ingredients in there, and what you want to do is just blend that until it forms into a nice sandy kind of gritty consistency. And this is going to be our suya dust, which we will finish off at the end on our filet. So feel free to add as much or as little as you want. But what you're looking for with the finished product, once you've blended everything together, is something like this. It's kind of a sandy-like consistency. You see in there, you have the little flecks of the nut in there, the bouillon, the ginger, the garlic, just the perfume, the aroma. It just smells just spectacular already. And it's gonna give the umami bomb and just kind of accent those amazing flavors that are already in that high quality filet to just really transport your taste buds to the coast of Africa and Nigeria. So that is our suya dust. We're gonna put that to the side and we're gonna jump into our filet. All right, so what we have right now, you wanna always, as always, every single time, you wanna have a rip-roaring, scorching hot pan because it's gonna give you that nice hard sear. And it's always super important to remind you guys, you wanna always use a oil with a high smoke point, whether it be canola, grapeseed oil, you take your pick, something that's not gonna really burn and smoke too quickly because it's gonna impart a bitter flavor into the steak, and we don't want that. So what I have here is some grapeseed oil. And I'm gonna add that to our scorching hot pan. Okay? You let that oil come up to temp right now. And once the oil gets nice and hot, we wanna add our filet into the pan. So you give it a second. We don't wanna rush this process because step number one, we wanna ensure the crust on there. And as I always say, that nice hard crusty sear keeps the juiciness, keeps the flavor, keeps the deliciousness in the steak where it belongs. So it's always important to remember that. Scorching hot pan, room temperature, heavily seasoned filet. These are the steps and instructions that you want to always follow to ensure that amazing product, because you already have the great product right here in Omaha Steaks. You want to ensure that you execute with these simple instructions, and we'll give you a steakhouse caliber steak every single time that steak hits the pan. So I'm already starting to hear some snap, crackle, pop action going right now. So I think that's time to put our steak into there. So as always, use the ears. God gave them, so use them, and just put it into the pan. And that's what we're looking for. You don't want to overcrowd the pan because the more steak or more things or more proteins you have in the pan, it's going to actually cool the pan down. So I think that 4 It's just the right amount right there. Give the pan a nice little shake and let the steak do its thing. Don't rush it. Don't touch it. Right now, we're forming that nice hard sear on the outside of the filet, and that's going to ensure a perfect steak every single time. So you want to sear that for about, I'd say, about 3 to 4 minutes right now to get that nice hard sear. We're going to flip that, let it go for another 3 or so minutes, and then we're going to baste that with butter, and then that's going to be the first step in this amazing recipe. All right, so you let the steak do its thing. You let that hard sear, that hard crust form. And once it does that, we're gonna flip it over. We're gonna do a little butter baste and add even more fat, even more flavor, even more deliciousness into the steak. And the only way you'll get this is by having a nice, ripping, roaring hot pan. So always remember that. Cast iron is really good. That's one of my favorites. I live in the South, so cast iron is king when it comes to steak cookery, in my opinion. But the proof is in the pudding, so try it out for yourself. You let me know. But more important than the pan itself, make sure that it's scorching hot. All right, so we're gonna take a peek here, look. All right, as you can see, that nice hard sear is starting to form. Let it go for a little while longer, but that's what we're looking for. And as I always say, color and brown equals flavor. It's the caramelizations in the meat, the natural sugars in the meat that brought to the forefront of the steak and give you flavor and contrast and texture, which is all key notes for a great steak. Okay, so once you have the hard sear on the filet, you want to go ahead and flip. And you see that right there is what we're looking for, that nice caramelization, that nice char, and that's gonna seal in all of the juice, all of the fat, all of that flavor in the filet, and keep it nice and tender. All right, so once we flip it, we wanna go ahead and do a butter baste because fat is flavor, and the butter, the brown butter, once you put that in the pan, it's gonna add a whole nother flavor profile as well by adding a little bit of, fat for mouthfeel and also this appearance, the visual cue when that butter just glazes and just kind of coats that steak. It's truly a thing of beauty. All right, so you let that go for another 3 to 4 minutes because what we're aiming for is a medium rare steak. So to this, I'm gonna add the butter to the pan, kind of move the steaks up there to the forefront, butter to the pan, and as the butter melts, we wanna tilt the pan back and just baste. All right, baste, 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 and just have a nice little harmonious marriage with the steak and the butter. And as you can see, that butter starts to coat and just kind of, layer over that filet and just really add some great flavor and also impart some nice color. And as the butter browns, that's gonna help the browning and the sear of the filet further even more. So once our steak has been cooked in the pan, you got that nice hard sear, and we've butter basted our steaks as well because fat is what? Flavor. You got it right. We're gonna take our steaks out of the pan and we want to let them rest. Resting the steak is very important because we've perfectly cooked the steak with a craftsman's touch. But now you wanna let the steak rest and let those juices redistribute throughout the steak. All right, so you let that do its thing, let that rest for about 7 to 8 minutes, so that way, when you cut into the filet, it's a perfect tried and true cook every time, and you get that delicious coast-to-coast thickness with following these steps. And trust me, when you bite into this, one of the best steaks ever. So let the filet do its thing, and we're gonna jump right into our red rice risotto. Now, red rice originally hails from western coast of Africa, and you can see the roots of this heavily steeped in Olaf rice coming over to the States and, your Charleston, Georgia, the southern states, red rice, which has tomatoes, seasonings, spices, peppers, and even furthermore so you can see the roots steeped even further in jambalaya. So what I want to do, because you know me, I'm all about blending cultures and taste and just really, really pushing the needle further. further, I'm going to make this into the risotto, which is traditional pasta dish, rather, of Italian food. So the red rice and risotto is a hybrid of two of my favorite things, and it has the yum factor throughout with that nice creaminess of that risotto, but the herbaceousness, the spice, the flavor, the depth, and layers of texture that you'd find in the red rice, but in the risotto. So pay attention, I'm gonna walk through the steps so you too can make this at home. So first things first, risotto requires chicken stock. So right now I'm heating up our chicken stock. The chicken stock is gonna give the viscosity and also the flavor that you'd find in risotto. But we wanna first start off with our red rice base. So I'm gonna get my pot started here. Okay, so whenever you're starting out with your red rice, you always wanna have a base of tomato, pepper, onion, garlic. That's gonna really be the flavorful base that you find in your red rice. It'll give it flavor, it'll give it texture, and it'll also give it that deep red color that you see in red rice. So very first things first, we have our olive oil right here. To this, I'm going to add yellow onion. I love that sizzle sound. Red pepper, and minced garlic. And what you want to do right now is get a nice caramelization on those vegetables because you're releasing the natural sugars in the onion, in the garlic, and the pepper. And as I've said before, brown is flavor. Brown is just, it gives it the yum factor. So you let the onion, the pepper do its thing. Let it all come together, let those flavors bloom, and just really just kind of meld as one. By caramelization of the vegetables, you're ensuring that really good flavor where you're cooking the vegetables, are also releasing the natural sweetness that you'll find in the vegetables too. I don't know about you, but anytime you have onions and garlic in a pot, it's a good time to me. And it's already starting to smell excellent. All right, so you let that go for about, minute to 2 minutes and get nice and browned inside of the pot. And let it just do its thing. Let the flavors come together, develop it. Take your time because it makes all the difference when the vegetables are sufficiently caramelized. Okay, so once our onions and peppers and garlic has come together and caramelized, we want to add the rest of our red rice ingredients. You want to add some chopped beefsteak tomatoes. Tomatoes are always a must in red rice. It's gonna give it that nice, fresh kind of note and also gives it that flavor and that really deep, rich red color along with the red bell peppers. It's gonna make for a really tasty bite and complement our Suya-Dusted Filet Mignon to perfection, in my opinion. All right. So to that also, we're gonna add tomato paste for an even deeper layer of tomato flavor and a little bit of sweetness and nuttiness from that as well. You wanna add some Worcester for a nice umami pop. A little bit of smoked paprika, because smoked paprika, anytime I can toss it in, is really, really good. Gives it a nice smokiness and nice peppery note. And a little bit of salt and pepper, which is always a must and one of my favorite 80s R&B rap groups. All right, so you bring that all together, you let the tomato paste get nice and nutty, nice and brown, break down, really just kind of, have those tomatoes and the peppers become one, the Worcester, the salt, the pepper, the paprika, just really all come together and just have those flavors that are synonymous with a great red rice. And that's what we want, right? Greatness. Okay, so you let that come to a boil, let the tomatoes break down, and once it starts to break down, I'm gonna reduce the heat, let it come to a simmer, and then we're gonna go on to the next step. So let that do its thing, let the tomatoes get nice and tender, let it break down with the peppers, the seasonings, the spices, the tomato paste, and that's gonna get us exactly where you wanna be for the next step in our red rice risotto. Once all the peppers, the tomato, the onion, the garlic, all that is broken down and got nice and tender, we want to add all of that into our food processor and blend it into a nice puree. So all of those flavors of West Africa, of Wolof, of red rice, we want to put that and have it be throughout in the risotto. So a little bit of Africa, Italy, and the South mashup, but it's going to be flavorful. So into our food processor we go. All right. Every little bit, get into the corners of all the pot because we do not want to waste any of this deliciousness. Alrighty. And then you want to blend it till it's nice and pureed. Alright. Careful, it's very hot. Be careful not to burn yourself. All right, so that's what we're looking for right now. Everything's nice and pureed. We've made a delicious, flavorful, bright red puree of the red pepper, the tomato, and that's gonna be the base of our red rice risotto. So we'll have that right there. Leave that there for the moment. And next we're gonna jump into our risotto portion of it, where you're really making the nice hybrid of the red rice flavors, but in a traditional, creamy Italian risotto. So you can use the same pot. Bring that back up to heat. We're gonna add a little more olive oil in there. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna toast the arborio rice in the pot. And what we're doing right now with the toasting process with the arborio rice is gonna get that nice, it's gonna do a couple things. It's gonna impart flavor, nuttiness, and also ensure a nice, flavorful, succulent, properly cooked risotto all the time. So get that oil up to a nice hot heat temperature. And then once it comes up to temp, we're gonna add the arborio rice. And this short grain pasta right here is super starchy and what gives risotto its texture, its flavor, and its consistency. All right, so I'm starting to hear sizzle, sizzle, sizzle. And that's a sign to add the arborio rice. Okay. And simply put right now, what you're doing is sauteing, getting a nice brown on that arborio rice, and give it a nice nuttiness as well. Because we're all about imparting flavor at any step of the cooking process, and any chance we have to add even more flavor, please believe I'm gonna take it. This process, when you're browning off the arborio rice, it goes very quickly, about, minute and a half. And what you're looking for is the risotto or the arborio rice to get a nice brown color and also a little bit of translucency. And that translucency is from the arborio rice absorbing all that oil. And as I've said before, time and time again, oil, fat is flavor. All right. So it's looking good so far, going pretty quickly. And I'm all about using one pot. The less dishes I have to do means I have more time to eat, and that's a thumbs up for me, a resounding yes from the audience. Okay. So once the risotto gets nice and nutty and brown, we cannot forget about our red rice base. We're gonna add that into the arborio rice. Smells amazing all right now. Get that nice smokiness from the paprika. We got the red bell pepper for a little bit of spice. We got the garlic, we got the onion. We marry that all together. And then from there, we are going to start adding our chicken stock. Now you wanna only add about a cup at a time because you wanna give the arborio rice a chance to absorb the chicken stock and stay, tender, but not get mushy. So a little bit at a time, about a cup every, 3 to 5 minutes, and you only add more chicken stock when the arborio rice absorbs that liquid. All right, so let the arborio rice do its thing. And little by little, we add a cup at a time. And when that arborio rice is nice and tender, we're gonna finish it off with my favorite part, Parmesan cheese. Okay? So you let that simmer. You don't want it to go too fast because you don't wanna burn the ingredients, and also allow the arborio rice adequate time to absorb that delicious red base as well as the chicken stock, because it's flavor, and more flavor. All right, so once the risotto has gotten nice and creamy and the arborio rice is tender, al dente to the bite, we wanna go ahead and then finish it off with the finishing touches, a little bit of Parmesan cheese, however much you like. Some like more, some like less. I'm from the school of more. And a little bit of Italian parsley, a little brightness, freshness, and color. And then we stir that all together. And that is our red rice risotto right there. You got the peppers, you got the onion, the garlic, the tomato paste, the spices, the Worcester. You have all those flavors that you find in traditional red rice, but in a risotto. Creamy, delicious, cheesy, a little bit of spice, and everything nice. Okay, so now that our risotto is finished, you want to serve that immediately so it stays nice and creamy, but we want to slice into our perfectly cooked fillets. So I'm gonna slide this up here, okay? And I'm going to go ahead and slice into one and start plating up here in a moment. All right, so a couple slices, let the knife do the work. And as you can see, perfect medium rare right there. And that is a result of that perfect sear on there, nice room temperature steaks, and a searingly hot pan. Okay, so I'm gonna do a couple slices. Let's plate up and let's eat. My favorite part. All right, so let's plate our dish. Okay, we have our creamy, cheesy, peppery, have spice from there from the red rice risotto in here. And we're gonna add that first to our plate. Okay. All right. And then we have our filet, a couple slices like so, right? And then from there, we cannot forget our suya dust. We're gonna take a little bit of that and just sprinkle as much or as little as you want. And there we have our Suya-Dusted Filet Mignon with red rice risotto. From West Africa to your plate.